Good morning, and welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. I'm Karen Alvarez, your worship associate this morning, and the service today is being led by our minister, Eileen Casey Campbell. This service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. We will plan on continuing with hybrid worship throughout the church year, so you can join us each week here in person, on Zoom, or later on YouTube if you prefer. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway. And whether it's your first visit or your 100th visit, we're glad that you came. I have a few announcements to share with you today. Please wear a mask. Masks are available for anyone who forgot one. RE and childcare will be provided this morning by Nancy Reed and Kaya Mills. We will be collecting the cards for Joys and Sorrows after our first hymn. Please fill them out or type into the chat box on Zoom if you have something that you'd like to share. I have an announcement for the good of the community related to the Nearly New sale, which I've announced for about a month now, and will continue announcing for another month. So we have changed the date to May 20th. There are price envelopes with stickers and guidelines in the back. It's very, very simple pre-price before you drop your donations off. We made it real easy and made 4 price categories, so you can just sticker accordingly. We will also need baked goods because we are also having a big sale. And we will need bags if you, like me, have an assortment of paper bags that you have accumulated and don't really know what else to do. Now's your chance. We will be taking collections the Thursday and Friday day and evening prior. Are there any other announcements?
Yes. I've got a couple announcements for us this morning. One is that Karen is leading our May Day service a day early next Sunday and is collecting ribbons or long scraps of fabric. There's a basket at the back, so if you have those things to drop off, you can drop them off anytime between now and next Sunday. They would be very useful. We'll need lots of ribbons. And then my second announcement is that if you signed up to come to the Storytelling as Preaching workshop, and you are looking for a story, there are a number of books of stories on the back table. Feel free to peruse those and then use your phone to snap pictures of a story or slap a Post-it on it, and I will send you a copy of that story. If you are not planning to be at the Preaching as Storytelling workshop, but you think maybe you should be, let me know, and we will work that out.
Any other announcements? As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and devices. We now enter a space of worship. I understand I'm going to have some assistance here with chalice lighting today. We have a big long candle, so you guys can both hold. There you go. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words. we gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. And happy Earth Day, one day late. So I want to tell you this morning about my friend Tenzin. Tenzin is a Tibetan Buddhist monk, and he happens to be one of the world experts in sand mandala. Has anybody ever seen a sand mandala? Do you know what I'm talking about when I say that? So the way that Tenzin creates a sand mandala, usually with a group of other monks, or sometimes with a group of students, he teaches this art, is that he has a brass cone with a tiny hole at the bottom. Looks like a skinny ice cream cone with a hole right where the ice cream would leak out, but it's not filled with ice cream, it's filled with sand. And it's got some ridges on the side. And then he's got a long sort of brass pencil looking thing. And so just a couple grains of sand come out of that little tip of the cone at a time when he rubs the ribs with the pencil-looking thing. And he uses different colors of sand to create these huge, giant table-sized pieces of mandala art. So just a few grains at a time, he goes dot by dot by dot with sand. And it takes weeks to create this enormous sand mandala that holds all of this beauty and meaning. And then when he's finished, often there's some time for prayer and blessing, and people gather to see what's been created. And then what he does is prays a blessing over the sand mandala, gets a little broom, and sweeps it all up into a bucket and releases the sand into a nearby body of water. Usually for him, it's Seneca Lake or the Seneca-Cayuga Canal. And he lets it go. And I think that maybe that's why we come to church, maybe especially why we come to church on Earth Day, because we have to learn over and over sometimes that we can love a beautiful creation, even a creation that we have made with our own hands. But when the time comes, we do have to practice letting it go. So let's take a deep breath in together as we begin our service. And I invite you to rise in body or in spirit here or at home and join in singing hymn number 175, We Celebrate the Web of Life.
We can sing
Friends, we are a community that promises to hold one another in both our joys and in our sorrows. In our celebrations and in our pain, we promise we are with you. So I invite you, if you have joys or sorrows on your heart this morning that you'd like to share, either with your name or anonymously, to write them on the cards in the seats beside you or type them into the chat if you're joining us on Zoom, and pass them forward now. Our friends Oren and Elliot are going to collect the joys and sorrows, so if you have one to share, would you place it in the basket as they come around? Are there joys and sorrows to lift up this morning? Sometimes it's worth it to do things the long way. And now it's time for a story. This morning's story comes from a book called Grandmother Fish. And we've got pictures that will be on the screen over here to my left. So if there are any smaller people or even bigger people, no one's going to stop you, who want to see the pictures up close, there's some space on the floor where you could come sit, or some empty chairs where you could come and be closer to the story. So if you'd like to see these pictures up close, come on forward now, right over to this corner on the side. While you're coming up, I will tell you that Grandmother Fish is a book that's published by our UU publishing house, Skinner House, and it's written by Jonathan Tweet, and these illustrations that we're going to look at are by Karen Lewis. Go ahead and have a seat, friends. Over on the floor in the corner or in the chairs right in front of Pat. And the story goes like this. This is our grandmother Fish. She lived a long, 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 long time ago. She could wiggle and swim fast. Can you wiggle? She had jaws to chomp with. Can you chomp with your jaws? Grandmother Fish had many kinds of grandchildren, and they could wiggle and chomp like her. Do you see our grandmother Reptile? This is our grandmother Reptile. She lived a long, 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 long time ago. She could crawl across the ground. Can you crawl? And she could breathe air in and out. Can you breathe? Grandmother Reptile had many kinds of grandchildren. They could wiggle and chomp and crawl and breathe. Do you see our grandmother Mammal? This is our grandmother Mammal. She lived a long, long, long time ago. Her babies could squeak when they were hungry. Can you squeak? Very well. And she could also cuddle with her babies and feed them milk. Do you know how to cuddle? Grandmother Mammal had many kinds of grandchildren. They could wiggle and chomp and crawl and breathe and squeak and cuddle. Do you see our grandmother Ape? This is our grandmother Ape. She lived a long, long time ago. She could grab branches to climb. Can you grab with your hands? And she could hoot when she was happy. Can you hoot? Very well. Grandmother Ape had many kinds of grandchildren. They could wiggle and chomp and crawl and breathe and squeak and cuddle and grab and hoot. Do you see our grandmother Human? This is our grandmother Human. She lived a long time ago. She could walk on 2 feet. Can you walk? Yes. And she could talk and tell stories. Can you talk? Yeah. Grandmother Human had many kinds of grandchildren. And they could wiggle and chomp and crawl and breathe and squeak and cuddle and grab and hoot and walk and talk. And I see a lot of them right here. And this is the end of our story. You can make your way back to your seats. And if you want to look at this book with your own 2 hands later, I'll put it on the back table.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church and its work. Each week, we would like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time. This week, I'm choosing the Worship Committee. They are largely responsible for all of the things that happen during the worship, including being the worship associate. Please feel free to volunteer. It's actually really not that scary up here. And we could definitely welcome any additional assistance. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket or by one of the options on your screen. Please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering.
We have lots of joys and sorrows to share this morning. We share the righteous frustration of Oren at having to take a COVID test. What a pain. We share in worry about an elder's Alzheimer's. And we lift up our thoughts for a friend who is ill. We share our sorrow with Sam and his brothers who lost their mother unexpectedly. And we have so much gratitude and joy to lift up as well. Joy for a game of mini golf with friends, for a successful melanoma surgery, joy for Mama, gratitude for the pancakes had for breakfast this morning, and for a field trip looking forward to. For all these joys and sorrows and all those left in the silence of our hearts, Karen will drop a stone in the water and we will say to one another, we are with you. Will you say it with me?
We are with
you. And now it's time for our children to go downstairs to RE. I actually think I'm looking at Kaya. You might head outside first. Outside first, so meet at the door. And grab your coat on the way if you need one. And now I'd like to invite you into a time of centering, followed by some shared silence. By shared silence, of course, we mean the absence of grown-ups talking to each other so that we can listen more closely to the sounds of life, the sounds of the birds outside, the sounds of our children's laughter in the backyard, the sound of your neighbor's breath in the chair beside you, the beating of your own heart. Let's take a deep breath in. Between the pangs of childbirth, I thought about Tiamat, that ancient sea goddess split in half to create the world. Creation tore me apart, and oh, yeah, I screamed my every muscle. I get it now. I had forgotten for a moment. The postscript, those clever Semitic ancestors added, and God said it was good. A world born out of the swirling waters of chaos, and God said it was good. A world with fat baby cheeks and sun-dappled forests and chamomile tea with rye toast and skinny dipping at sunrise just because you're 19. So utterly good divinity weighs in to proclaim it so. A world with tyrants and genocides, disease and homophobia, waste and white supremacy and socks that slip down inside your boot, and pain so bad you think surely it will split you apart. And still, we promise ourselves to whichever God can love even this, because with a love like that, pulsing in the waters of the deep, we can be pulled utterly apart and still somehow weep at the goodness of it all. Let us center our bodies where we sit, slow our breath, relax our shoulders, perhaps close our eyes, and enter into a time of silence together. So, in a recent meeting with our social and environmental justice team, Team 6, they pointed out, very gently, I want to say, that we didn't celebrate Earth Day together last year, but we usually do. And made, again, a very gentle request that maybe we could do that this year. So here we are, and happy Earth Day. But I do have to say, I don't know about you, but I go to a lot of continuing education programming, social justice organizing, gatherings of UUs of one sort or another, and talk a lot about eco-grief or climate anxiety, about our despair at the future of the earth. And I am really tired of talking about earth sorrow. Are you? Yeah, good, me too. Because today I would like to offer you a gift of earth joy. And I think it's important not just because we deserve it, and so does the earth, but that I think that maybe joy in the earth, in the wild vulnerability and power of creation, is an antidote to not just eco-grief and climate anxiety, but to the vulnerability of the earth itself. And so let's start with joy in creation by telling a creation story. So the creation story of ancient Babylon, one of them anyway, which is modern day Iraq, went like this. In the beginning, the world was a sea of chaos. These waters of the deep contained and were also somehow made out of the body of a primal being named Tiamat. Her body, by the way, took the shape of a giant clam or mussel, some kind of mollusk, which is supposed to be scary. Not funny. She had birthed the first gods in this world, who in turn made other beings, including one named Marduk, a more human-shaped god, or a god-like human, depending on who you ask. We're reading this off of 3,000-year-old stone tablets. So the gods began to battle with one another in these primordial waters, and this young god, or maybe person, Marduk, rose in power. He captured Tiamat, the mother of all, whose body was the world, and he sliced her in half. Remember that clamshell shape we're picturing. He cast the top shell upward to become the dome of the sky, and the bottom shell below to become the dome of the earth. Over the course of a week, he set the sun and stars and moon in the top dome and formed land filled with vegetation and animals in the lower dome. And then, triumphant in battle and satisfied with creation, on the last day he rested. Sound a little familiar? Yeah, we'll come back to that though. I love a good creation myth. Heck, I love a terrifying creation myth. And they all have a little bit of terror in them, I think. Even the creation myth of grandmother fish that we told earlier. And maybe this is where you're silently disagreeing with me about whether that's a myth. We teach the science of evolution as truth in our church, and yeah, of course we do. But the way we tell the story of the science of evolution, the way we mythologize it, is to put ourselves at the center. To tell it as if humans are the culmination of the evolutionary process. And the terror underlying that myth is our own quiet understanding that perhaps we're not the main characters of the story of speciation, and actually maybe, just like all species, the fruit of a million billion useful accidents of reproduction. One of my favorite theologians, Catherine Keller, in writing about the Enuma Elish, which is the name of that Babylonian creation myth we just told, says that all creation, all creativity, happens on the edge of chaos. The Tehomic edge, she calls it, named after that goddess, Tiamat, whose body is the material of the world. There is this sense in all the best creation stories that creation, creativity, takes place on a precipice of mystery and the unknown. I think, as creators ourselves, humans understand this really deeply. Weaving chaos into the narrative of creativity reminds us that all creation, even what we create ourselves, unfolds outside the boundaries of our power and control. The Haudenosaunee creation story, one of them anyway, tells us this. Before the world was created, there was a sky world above us, filled with sky people living there. And one day, a pregnant sky woman fell through a hole left by an uprooted tree, and she fell for what seemed like forever. And after a long, long time, she saw a world of oceans below her. The animals in the world below began to gather to try to understand what this creature was who was falling toward them. The geese flew to her and gently caught her in a circle of wings. They carried her to Turtle, who had offered his back as a safe place to land. Beaver and otter and muskrat dove deep into the depths of the water and brought up mud to form land on Turtle's back. And the woman opened her palm to reveal seeds she had carried from the sky world above. She planted them in the mud, and vegetation took root in this world below. She became the mother of all people here. This story centers that truth of non-control underlying all our creation myths, that we are somehow miraculous accidents, a trip, a fall, plummeting by chance toward a world that miraculously meets us with gentle grace. See, I think this disorder that haunts our creation stories, if we allow it, can be a gift to us, a source of joy in the earth, because it serves as a doorway for grace. For us, like Sky Woman, to receive the miraculous gifts of this world in the context of knowing that none of it belongs to us. Even the creation wrought of our own desires cannot be owned by us. At the beginning of my first planned and wanted pregnancy, my own creation story, if you will, I found myself haunted by this same creative chaos. I was, at first, holding back my joy, refusing to let it expand. In those early days, I knew the risk of pregnancy loss was high, and I told myself to wait on joy until I knew this baby was really mine to keep. So I held joy at bay. I refused to think about it for those first dozen weeks. And then when that riskiest time had passed, I woke to the realization that risk and danger still lurked around every corner, that this tiny fetus was a person whose absolute safety I could never guarantee, and who was not mine at all. Because creativity has a momentum of its own. Our creations cannot be our property. And my desire set forth into the world did not belong to me anymore. I had to allow myself to let joy grow without security. I had to accept the non-control of a creation that continues to unfold on its path in order to receive the gift of grace that being part of this ever-unfolding creation story can offer. This is a feeling that returns to me whenever my children climb a tall tree or navigate big, hard feelings or go off in the world without me for a while. What I have helped to make is not mine to keep. I think it's also a familiar feeling for artists who release their creation out into the world, and writers who set their words free for others to read and make of what they will. So the Ainu people of Japan and some eastern parts of Siberia tell, among other tales, this story of creation. In the time when the universe was born, the world was nothing but deep and dark, muddy water. The gods above the world sent down a bird spirit to be a creator. The little wagtail bird dove into the swampy depths and pulled mud from the waters, patting it with his tail over and over again until it became solid. He did this again and again and again until the islands of Japan were formed. Then the gods sent down more spirits to inhabit the land, including the great bear spirit who was the ancestor of humans. In Slavic mythology, which we know only by reading through the lines of Christianized folklore, one of their creation stories says that the world began as an endless sea. One of the gods decided to expand it. He convinced a demon to dive down to the depths of the sea and bring up dirt to be land. Well, the demon, being demonic and all, thought he'd play a trick instead. So he dove into the abyss and gathered dirt but hid it in his mouth. When he came to the surface and met with the god, he said nothing, mouth being full of dirt, but just shrugged. The god was suspicious and sent bursts of thunder and lightning at the demon, who, terrified, ran across the waters, coughing and sputtering the whole way. And even now, they say, you can see where he jumped and ducked by the shape of the mountains and the valleys it created. Again and again, out of the swirling waters of turmoil, the world is formed. And afterwards, it feels more orderly, organized, coherent. But the stories we tell about it do not let us forget that its material is chaos. 30 years ago, Carl and Maureen Titchener, ministers and founders of this church, gathered a small group together to worship and to dream. And this little group, some of whom are here this morning, dreamed about a congregation of Unitarian Universalists here in Canandaigua, a place to raise their children in a faith with love at its center, a community to care for one another, a shared vision for working toward a better world. We exist here today as a church because of them. What they created back then has unfurled in ways I'm sure they could not have imagined at the time. That's how it is with congregations, the same way it is really with all creations. Whether we build them out of nothing or come into churches 200 years old, we sculpt these beautiful communities in the shape of love and justice and thoughtful care. We bring a little order to the chaos of the world. And then the very best case scenario is that they take on a life of their own, far beyond our little lives, unfolding in ways that we can't yet imagine. This is the terror and the joy of creation. It has its own force, its own momentum that flows on and on, beyond us and without our bidding. This holds, I hope, the antidote to the climate anxiety and the eco-grief we carry on this Earth Day. The wildness of creation holds a terror in it, in that it cannot be owned, subdued, ordered by us. It contains this chaos that makes it both so powerful and so vulnerable. And, as any of you know who've climbed a mountain and looked out over the edge of an abyss, that same wildness of creation also contains an ocean of joy. It is in its freedom, its refusal to be owned, and its invitation that we be similarly liberated, that we find the goodness of creation. So, one more creation story. One I think you've probably heard before. The Jewish creation myth, one of them anyway, goes like this. In the beginning, when the gods created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered Tehomat, which we usually translate into waters of the deep, but it's the name you remember from back in Babylon, while a wind from the gods swept over her face. Then the gods said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And the gods saw that the light was good, and they separated light from darkness. They called the light day and the darkness night, and there was evening and there was morning, the first day. And the gods said, "Let us separate the waters," Tiamat. So they separated the waters into the dome of the sky and the dome of the sea below, and there was evening and there was morning, the second day. The gods saw that it was good. Over the next 4 days, they go on to make dry land, call the land to produce plants, trees, and fruits of all kind. They create the lights of the sun and the stars in the sky and the creatures of the sea and the land below, including us humans. And at each step, they proclaim of creation, "It is good." Then on the final day, they rest in the beauty of the earth. Sounds like our first story, right? It totally is. Whole long phrases of the original Hebrew are word for word the same as the Enuma Elish. And if there are any biblical literalists out there, baffled you're here, sorry to burst your bubble, but it's totally plagiarized from the Babylonian version. Well, to be fair, there's no such thing as plagiarism in folklore. Stories are meant to be told and then retold in new ways for new times. Remember, we can't control the creations we put out into the world, and the Babylonians' creation myth got away from them a little bit. You see, back in the 580s BCE, Jerusalem was invaded by the Empire of Babylon. The Babylonian army conquered the city of Jerusalem, pillaged the temple, and took some 10,000 Jewish citizens back to Babylon to be held in slavery. The enslaved people had mostly been members of the higher classes of Hebrew society. They were priests, scribes, students of law, members of the king's court, and lucky us, they were literate. These are the people who wrote the Jewish Bible. And all the evidence we have says they wrote almost all of it while enslaved in Babylon. The people creating these texts were people struggling to find a way to make meaning out of the world in the midst of trauma. So they listened to the stories being told around them, and they told and retold them. And they wrote something absolutely delightful into this creation narrative that was not there before. They gave their gods, they still had several back then, a refrain of praise to sing after each stanza of creation. And the gods said it was good. The wild nature of creativity is terrifying to behold, but the story consoles us at every step. It is good. A world formed out of terror and chaos and a million billion tiny accidents, and isn't it an absolute miracle? The substance of this world is mystery, and it is good. It is good. 7 times over, they tell us it is good. These people stood on the edge of chaos, waded through a sea of trauma and heartache and completely inexplicable, unreasonable pain, and decided that the way to make sense of this utterly unreasonable sorrow of the world was to love it anyway. Love it for the very reason that it is a creation that will not be ordered or controlled, cannot be owned, and neither could they. They decided to tell a story of a world with that refrain of goodness. We also get to tell the story of the goodness of creation, to tell it and retell it in new ways for new times. And may it always be so. It is good. Amen.
On a sleepy, endless ocean, when the world lay in a dream, there was rhythm in the splash and roll, but not a voice to sing. So the moon fell on the breakers, and the morning warmed the waves, till a single cell did jump and hum with joy, as though to say, this is my hope, this is my only hope, this is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone, rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden. And the day shone bright around her, till the one turned into 2, and the 2 into 10,000 things, and the old things into new. And on some virgin beachhead, one lonesome critter crawled, and he looked about and shouted out in his most astonished drawl, this is my hope, this is my only hope, this is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray was carpet green, and the weary children of the woods went dancing in between. And the people sang rejoicing when the fields were glad with grain, this song of celebration from their cities on the plain. This is my home, this is my only home, it's the only sacred ground I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone, rock me goddess in the gentle arms of Eden. Now there's smoke across the harbor, there's factories on the shore, and the world is ill with greed and will and enterprise of war. I will lay my burdens in the cradle of your grace, and the shining beaches of your love, and the sea of your embrace. This is my home, my only home. It's the only sacred ground I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone, rock me goddess in the gentle arms of Eden. Rock me goddess in the gentle arms of Eden.
I'd like to offer as a benediction these words from who else on Earth Day? Mary Oliver. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, let it go. Will you rise in body or in spirit and sing together our closing hymn number 203, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky. I almost told you the Catholic title, which I'm going to try very hard not to sing the words up.
Please join while we extinguish the flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.